writing revision. So during your exam, you'll be asked to write 2 documents. These can include, but they're not limited to, things like letters, emails, articles, reports, reviews, blogs, and narratives. You should spend around 25 minutes on each task. Then, using the remaining time, you must proofread your work. When writing a text, it is important that you think about your audience that you are writing to and what the purpose of the document is. This will help you to set the tone of your writing. So, for example, if you're writing a letter, you would need to use formal language, which is obviously more of a serious tone. It's quite businesslike. If it's a review, this is where you need to use more persuasive language. So you're really trying to persuade somebody to buy that item. And this is going to be more of an enthusiastic tone. If it's a report that you're writing, you're going to need to use lots of facts and statistics. And this is going to be more of a serious tone. So there are some techniques that you can use to help you to write. And these are what we call De Forest. That's the easiest way to remember some of these techniques that you can use in your writing. So let's have a look at the D. So D stands for direct address. And when we're looking at direct address, we're talking to the reader. We are saying things like we, you, and our. A is for alliteration. So when we're looking at alliteration, we're looking at ways to use your writing that makes it more catchy and interesting. So what we say is that if 2 or more of your words have the same beginning sounding or the same letter, this is what alliteration is. We've also got some facts. And facts, we say they can be measured. So anything that's in there that can be backed up, it can be measured. You can also use them. You can put in some opinions. So opinions when you're giving your recommendations on items, that really helps. You can also place in rhetorical questions. So these are questions that don't need an answer. We don't need an answer for them, so they're absolutely fine. Emotive language, you've got to think about how you would make the writing more appealing, make it more powerful or persuasive. And this is when we play on people's emotions. So you're trying to get the reader to either feel happy or sad or angry, maybe upset, guilty. Any of these things is emotive language. And then here we've got some statistics. So it's important to use statistics in your writing because this backs up your point of view. Last one then, the T stands for 3, which is the rule of 3. And we've got things like an example here would be stop, look, and listen. This is when we're using that rule of 3. You've got 3 words consecutively, and they help you to really drive the message in what you're saying. Okay, so let's have a look at some writing features. So your writing features are things that make your writing stand out. And then we can also identify which kind of text we're looking at. Because if you was looking at a formal letter, we know that you need to include all of these things, like the sender's address, recipient's address, things like the date and the salutation, and the closing and the signature. All of those things, if you see them in a text, that layout is really important. You're going to get marked on this for your comprehension in your exam. So being able to write a formal letter out using the correct features, making sure it's laid out in the correct way is really, really important. If you're going to write an advertisement, again, there's lots and lots of layout features down here that you need to be aware of. And have a look online and see what some of the advertisement features look like, because you could have things like headings and subheadings. You can have some bullet points in there and some columns. So have a look at some regular features. What do they look like? You can also have articles, and you might see these a lot in newspapers or magazines. But again, you would see things like headings and subheadings, exactly the same as advertisement features. They're probably just laid out a different way. So sometimes you might see columns, sometimes you won't. It's entirely up to you how you want to lay it out. However, making sure definitely you've got those headings in, those subheadings, because we need to identify what type of text you're writing. If you're writing an email, we want things like the recipient's address. We want the subject title, salutation, and the closing again. So your salutation is when you're opening your email or your letter. So are you saying things like hello? Or are you saying dear? Now, dear, we normally keep it for formal letters. Hello would be more for your emails. If you're writing a leaflet, again, some of these probably are pretty much the same. You might have some indentations for your leaflet or some numbering. So instead of having bullet points, you might have number points. So again, have a look around, see what leaflets look like. You can do this, for example, if you go to doctor's surgeries, there's lots of leaflets on the boards. Have a look, see what kind of features they've got to make it stand out, to make it look like a leaflet. We've got a formal report here. So a formal report, it's really important with your formal report that you get the structuring spot on, but it is with any text. But here, they're going to expect to see headings. So a nice big heading at the top. They're going to want to see your subheadings and your bullet points. You can put some indentations in or some numbered points. They want it very much structured like that report would. And this is one that a lot of people probably struggle with because you might not use reports on a daily basis. So we'll have a look at reports and you also go do some research. Blogs is another one that a lot of people struggle to identify. But if you go online and you're searching for, I don't know, how to become a dog handler, if you're going to see other people's blogs, that's their experiences. And so that is, the blogs is laid out pretty much like an article. You've got your headings in there. You might have some subheadings in your strap lines. You might have some bullet points. So have a look at some blogs, go online and do your research. And then we've got narratives for this one. So narratives is your stories, or it could be your diary entries. Anything that's your narrative, it's your point of view, it's your aspect on things. So again, if you think of a story, would have a heading, which would be like your chapters. You might have a subheading that fits in there as well. Some bullet points and some strap lines. It just depends on the narrative. But again, making sure everything's in there with regards to your headings, subheadings, they're really important. Here then, so we've got some other features that you've got to include. Again, you're going to get marked on this. So you've got to include your paragraphs. They're really, really important. And your paragraphs, make sure your writing is really neat, it's in order, and it divides your sentences. You're putting 2 or 3 sentences into a paragraph, make it nice and neat. It gives it that logical perspective. If you're thinking about when to start a new paragraph, we normally start a new paragraph when we're looking at new topics. If you're talking about a new person or a new place. We look at it when we talk about time as well. So if you're flitting backwards and forwards between times, you'll then start a new paragraph. Here we've got some sentence types. So you need to be aware that you will be marked on how you do your sentences. So can you include some simple sentences? For example, it was disgusting. Or what about some of your compound sentences? So this is when you join 2 simple sentences together with a joining word. And those joining words can be things like and, so, but, or because. An example would be, it was disgusting, so I threw it in the bin. So can you see there, we've got a simple sentence on that side, we've got a simple sentence on that side, and we join it together with one of those joining words. Complex sentences communicate more than one idea. So they normally contain a simple sentence, which is what we looked at up here. And they include some extra information. So before starting her exam, Amy went to the shops to buy some snacks. It's that additional information. We could say that sentence, we could say this bit, Amy went to the shop to buy some snacks. We can say that on its own, but we want to give you that additional information. We want to give the reader something a bit more engaging. So if we put in beforehand that before starting her exam, we kind of get a bit more context as to what's going on. So as I mentioned before, Google is a really, really good search engine to go and do some revision. You can use any other search engine you want to, but have a look at some of those structures for the letters and the advertisements, etc. Go and do your own research. But here we've got some examples taken from some CGP books. So here we go. Here's an example of an email. So you may be used to emails because you may use it on a daily basis in your employment. But here we've got your things like your to box. So making sure you're writing in the person's email address. We've got your CC. So if you want to copy in anybody, CC means carbon copy. So if you want to copy anybody into the email, you would pop it in there. If you ever see BCC, that means it's blind carbon copy. You can copy somebody else into it, but we won't get that information. We won't get that person's email address. It will just be blind to everybody else. He said it's important that you put your subject in here. So pop in what your topic is for your email. And then here, this is where you're going to have your opening of your emails and your closing of your emails. And in between, you're going to have your paragraphs. Here's an example of a letter. So again, structurally, we'd have your email in the top section here. You are the most important person, so your email goes into the top right-hand corner. Then here, the person, whoever you're writing to, they're the second most important person, so you put their email on the left-hand side. You put your opening in here, and then again, we go in with your paragraphs down below. And then finally, you do your closing of your email and pop your name in at the bottom. This is what an article may look like. So again, we've talked about it needs to have a bold title at the top. So you can put your title in up there. You can put in a little subheading there, gives us an idea. It's that byline, gives us an idea of what you're going to be talking about in your article. And then we've got some more subheadings here. We've got a subheading there, followed by a paragraph. And then some more subheadings, followed by another paragraph. Those subheadings give us an idea of what that paragraph is going to be talking about. It also helps the reader, if they just want to look straight for what makes a great experience, they're just going to head straight for that subheading down there. So it helps the reader to gain information really quickly. When we're looking at reports, again, this is really important. It will be the same kind of layout to your article. You've got your heading there, you've got your byline there. So this is your strap line, adding additional information about the report and what you're going to be talking about. Again, you've got some subheadings in this report here. They've included a table, some more subheadings. They've made it even more complex. They've put in some bullet points, which again is going to push your marks up. The more different features you can add into your text, the more marks you're going to get. And your comprehension, your layout is your biggest part, marking wise, for your exam. So just think, can you add some bullet points in there? Can you add a subheading into your text? Could you add a table? What can you add that makes that text more complex? The structure makes it more complex. Here we go. So a leaflet. We've got your titles here. We've got your byline or your strap line there. We've got another subheading. We've got some numbered listing now, which is quite nice. This is different to your bullet points. And these are quite good when you're doing instructional text. So this leaflet is telling you how to lift a heavy object. So it's instructing you how to pick up the boxes. And that's when we'd use numbered points, because then we go through one step at a time until we get to the end. And then finally, we're looking at the punctuation. And again, you're going to get marked on your punctuation. So you need to be really comfortable with knowing how to place an apostrophe into your work. Really comfortable with doing brackets and colons and semicolons. These are all really important that you need to be able to work on. We've also got extra things like commas and dashes, inverted commas and exclamation marks. So do your research, have a go, see if you know exactly what to do. Because you need to make sure you're really comfortable with all of these types, because you are going to get marked on punctuation, as well as your spellings and as well as your grammar. So when we're looking at apostrophes, we have a few ways of doing apostrophes. We've got what we call an apostrophe for omission. And this is where we take two words and we take a letter out, and then it becomes one. So for example, if you've got the word do not, we can shorten that to don't. And we've done that by taking out this O here. And we've replaced it with this apostrophe here. We've also got another way of doing it, and this is the possessive apostrophe. And this is when we want to write about somebody who owns something. So for example, John here, John's got a car. So we want to put that apostrophe in to show that John owns that car. Now, if there's more than one person, the apostrophe will go after the S, not before the S, because it's the learner's workshop. There's more than one, it's plural, so we're looking at how the apostrophe goes after the S. If you've got brackets, again, this is just additional information. You can place any sort of information inside a bracket, and it just gives the reader that additional information. So he is good, but we want to say a little bit more. So we say he is and always has been good. If we're looking at colons, the colon is used to introduce a list or a quotation. So you'd pop your colons in, and then you start to formulate your list or pop in your quotation. Whereas a semicolon, this is used to separate two short sentences that are closely related. So for example, he liked a holiday in France. His wife preferred Spain. So again, you can see here, we've got this semicolon that separates that information. I almost imagine it a bit like a seesaw. That semicolon is your middle balance. And you've got these two sentences. They're both exactly the same weighted, and we just need to make them even. So we put that semicolon in. Whereas we've got other things like a comma. So there's lots of different ways to use commas, but we can do things like when we try to separate lists in an item, or we're trying to create a bit of a pause in a sentence. We can also use them if we're trying to add additional information. So instead of your brackets like we did previously, you can, if you want to have a bit of a softer additional information, we can put those commas in. We also have here a dash. So a dash may be used to replace brackets. So it's to indicate an afterthought. So if you want to describe something, it's just like, oh, I want to say something extra, but a comma quite doesn't go there. It's a full stop's too much. So let's just put a dash. It's just an afterthought that we've got. You can also put some inverted commas here. And so they're things like speech marks. So the inverted commas are speech marks that we put in, and they go around what people are saying. So for example, Vanessa asked, what is wrong? And again, there, she's asking a question. So we're going to put those inverted commas or those speech marks in. We've got an exclamation mark here. An exclamation mark is used at the end of a sentence, and it's to show really big emotion. So things like if someone's surprised or they're angry or they're fearful, we would put that exclamation mark in to show the reader, again, that that person is expressing big emotions. So use your search engines, go and do a bit more research on your punctuation. And then let's have a look at the tone of the writing. So the tone is the attitude of the writer. And again, this may be formal. So this is when you're writing to somebody you don't know. Or it may be informal. So you're writing to somebody you do know. So if it's formal, we do not make it chatty. We want to keep it quite professional. It's somebody that we don't know. And so we don't use things like slang words. We like to try to keep it formal. If it is formal as well, we don't use these emissive apostrophes. So we don't say things like don't. We would probably say do not. We would use interesting vocabulary. We would also use some formal connectives, so things like on the other hand or nevertheless. And we do not use, we do use some complex sentences. So you've got to make sure that you're putting in some of those more complex sentences to show how creative your writing can be.